Our first speaker is Dr. John KAYE. John is a Greens upper house member of with special interest on energy, so he's the energy spokesperson. And I'll just explain that we're going to have each of the speakers speaking for about 10 minutes, or up to 10 minutes, and then we're going to have a little bit of time for some questions to that particular speaker. And then after the speakers have finished, all the speakers, we're then going to have questions to any of the speakers at all, or maybe several of them might like to answer some of the questions, and we're hoping to finish around 9 o'clock. So thank you, John.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for giving up the state of origin. You can ask me in questions later which sides are playing. I might actually get it right. I want to begin by acknowledging that we're on the land of the Barramadigal people of the Eora Nation, paying my respects to their elders past, present and future. Tonight, I think, is not about the why, or about the why do it or the can do it, whether we can do it. It's about how we do it. It's not about why or can, except for can, of course, in the sense of ParraCAN. So it is about ParraCAN. We know why we should do it. 29 billion tonnes of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases going into the atmosphere every year is unsustainable. We know why Australia should do it. Firstly, we have a moral obligation to do it as a wealthy nation. Secondly, we have a lot of skin in the game. We are, as Ross Garnaut pointed out, a highly exposed nation. We need to get the rest of the world to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, preferably to zero, at least to a sustainable level. And we need to do that in a hurry, because if we don't, we are in real trouble as a coastal nation. But also there are massive benefits for us to do it. The University of Newcastle estimated 73,800 new jobs in a sustainable New South Wales, in a zero carbon future for New South Wales alone. There are far more jobs in a clean energy future than there are in a dirty energy future, and there's far more opportunities for Australia to build an export industry, far more opportunities for us to become world leaders in these technologies and create a very secure economic future for ourselves, but only if we move quickly. If we lag behind the rest of the world, we will lose those opportunities. We know about the can. We know that we can do it. We know about solar thermal technology. We know about the wind technology. We know about solar rooftop photovoltaic technology. We know about the tri-generation that Clover Moore in the City of Sydney is installing, driven by sustainable, biologically obtained gas, biogas. Put that together, you've got a very low carbon, zero carbon future for conurbations like Sydney. So the can and the why are easy. The real debate now is the how. How do we get there? The real question is what are the different mechanisms? And there are three. I was going to say there are three ideas on the table. There are really two ideas, two sets of ideas, and one piece of total nonsense on the table. The three ideas are the idea of regulation, the thou shalt not, the public investment, the direct changes to the economy directed from governments acting as our collective agents to achieve change. For example, telling the market, look, you simply can't go in for high-polluting activities like building more aluminium smelters, high-polluting activities like building more coal-fired power stations. These things don't belong in a low-carbon Australia. It's also about making sure that our superannuation funds, the collective money we put away for our future, is really spent on our future. Making sure superannuation money goes into the highly profitable renewable energy sector rather than into motorways and into new coal-fired power stations. The second set of ideas are the market ideas, the idea of putting a price, creating a signal, working with the competitive market. And that's really what we need to focus on tonight. The third set are the direct action ideas that come out of the coalition. And I always thought Direct Action was a newspaper that was sold by one or other Trotskyist group. Quite a good newspaper when it existed. I think it's now called Green Left Weekly, but I could be wrong. It's not. What Direct Action has come to mean is you take the very worst market design features. You find those markets for carbon which have utterly failed, and you turn those, you appropriate those ideas, and you take the idea that you really want to hand over taxpayers' money to the large corporations who donate to your election campaigns, And that's what direct action is. It's a $80 billion giveaway to the big end of town to achieve very little outcome. And no serious economist, no serious scientist, nobody who is serious about climate change would spend any time entertaining the ideas that the Coalition are putting on the table. So let's forget it. Let's just move on. Let's talk about regulation and price. I must say my personal opinion is that, and I think it's an opinion that's held by most people, is that price on its own will not achieve the outcomes that we need. It will not address the 60 million tonnes of carbon dioxide, for example, that the New South Wales coal-fired generators pump into the atmosphere every year. Just putting a price on that, the very best you can hope for is a transition to gas, which may, if you're very lucky, take that 60 million tonnes down to 29 or 30 million tonnes a year. Still not sustainable, still not taking us to all those jobs that exist in the clean energy future. But I would also say that without a price on carbon, you're pushing uphill. The other way of looking at it is the absence of a price on carbon emissions into the atmosphere is a massive subsidy to the big polluters. Basically, we're all handing over about $11 billion a year, probably more, about $20 billion a year or $30 billion a year to the big polluters for the free use of our atmosphere. And as long as we do that, we are disadvantaging the cleaner energy sources by subsidising the fossil fuel industry. I haven't even mentioned there the other subsidies they get in terms of diesel fuel rebates and transport subsidies, which some people estimate adds up to about $14 billion a year here in New South Wales alone. So the idea behind a price on carbon is fairly straightforward. You try and disadvantage the big polluters and disadvantage them with respect to the cleaner outcomes. So by putting a price on emissions, you say, well, it becomes economically feasible to shift to the competitive forms. But there are two problems with that. Firstly, if the competitive form is gas, as I said before, the best we can hope for, and after about a $30 billion investment in new technology, the best we can hope for is halving our emissions. If you halve your emissions, all you do is you double the time to the end of the planet. What you've really got to do is get the emissions towards zero. And for a nation like Australia, we can cost effectively, with a strong economy, get our emissions to zero. That's what we should be aiming for. We should not fall for the gas trap. We shouldn't go into the idea, well, gas will halve our emissions. That's terrific, let's go for gas. Apart from which, if we go for gas, we will end up with coal seam methane gas. And coal seam methane, the mining coal seam methane, is all about destroying our waterways, all about destroying our agricultural land. The second reason for doing it is the idea of raising revenue. And conservatively, a $26 a tonne carbon emissions, carbon tax, carbon price, would raise for the government about $11.5 billion a year. $11.5 billion a year, look, it's better than a poke in the eye with a burnt stick, but it's nowhere near enough to make the transitions that we need to make. Being absolutely realistic about this, that's 2 minutes to go. Oh, I'll talk quickly. It's not enough. The third argument is it provides an economic signal to consumers. That's the argument I'm least interested in, because what you're really saying is, let's make consumers, let's make households suffer in order to force them to change. Far better to help them change or to regulate that their houses have to be efficient. One of the big debates we've had is markets versus tax. Do we create a carbon market? Does the government auction off certificates versus actually putting a price on it? I have to say, in the end, when you look at it, the closer you look at it, the more you come down on the side of a tax rather than a market. Probably a market is it creates a property right to pollute, and if you want to change the amount you're polluting, you have to buy those certificates back. And then there are issues of market design. How much do we compensate the emissions-intensive trade-exposed industries? How much of that $11.5 billion do we give to the big polluters? Well, there's a problem. If you reward bad behaviour continues. So we would argue you need to keep that to an absolute minimum, and in the end, if people are polluting, then the real question is, should we continue those activities? For example, the aluminium industry in New South Wales, 1,500 employees, responsible for about 20% of the state's greenhouse gas emissions. If you move the same aluminium smelting activities to Central America, you would reduce the amount of carbon dioxide coming out of the energy that goes into them by a factor of 26. So instead of about 13.5 tonnes per tonne of aluminium, 13.5 tonnes of carbon dioxide per tonne of aluminium, you get about 1/4 of a tonne or 1/2 a tonne. It's a huge, because they generate their electricity cleanly from hydro, we generate our electricity dirtily from coal. We're one of the dirtiest producers of aluminium in the world. Look, the other thing to be said about a carbon price and a carbon tax is the world will not come to an end. The carbon price is going to redistribute $11.5 billion a year at $26 per tonne. The GST is 5 times that amount. That's $55 billion a year. It's 5 times bigger. Now, I don't like the GST, but when it came in, it didn't end our economy. Well, there was a headline in the Sydney Morning Herald today, sorry, in the Telegraph, and I know you're all avid Telegraph readers like me. The headline, exclusive 3,000 jobs to go in coal mining. That's across Australia, so about 1,500 here in New South Wales. Shock horror. Excuse me, the O'Farrell government has just wiped out 4,500 jobs in the rooftop solar industry by failing to give them a tariff. So let's not get caught with the solar panic. Let me just finish, if I can just have a couple more minutes. Let me just be really quick. I've talked about the gas trap, and I want to go back and just reiterate that. Don't get fooled by gas as a transition fuel. It isn't like you can just nick down the street, buy a bottle of gas and plug it in and say, well, terrific, we'll just use that till something better happens. The reality of getting the benefits out of gas means you have to take the electricity industry around Australia and rebuild it as combined cycle gas turbines. To do that, you're really talking about investing, well, you can argue, but I reckon somewhere around $40 to $50 billion in a technology which will still continue, which will take the 180 million tonnes of carbon dioxide we emit around Australia from our electricity industry each year and take it down to about 90 million tonnes. Still unsustainable. Let's not fall for that. The reality is, yes, we do need a carbon price, but the carbon price, putting a price on carbon, isn't even Act 1, Scene 1 of what we need to do. It is just the prelude. It just takes away the barriers, one of the barriers to the transition to a clean energy future. If we just do a carbon tax and we walk away from it and say that's it, I tell you what, we will have wasted $11 billion. We will not get there. If we are serious about getting there, we also need regulation and public investment. We know solar thermal power stations will become cost effective once we start building them. The argument we've said is, let's take $1 billion and build a 200 megawatt solar thermal power station in central western New South Wales. Let's just do it. It'll cost a lot of money. The first one always does. The second one will cost about half that amount. The third one about a third of that amount. There's a thing called the Fibonacci sequence. We will continue to get cheaper on that technology, but we won't get there unless somebody takes the punt on doing it. And the people who should take the punt are you and me collectively through our government. And we should take the punt, we should own those power stations, and as they become profitable, we should use that money to build more and more power stations. The Clover Moore plan for the City of Sydney, the Tri-Generation Alan Jones plan, no, I haven't gone over to 2GB, it's a different Alan Jones, the guy from Woking. His plan really does work. We really should be. It's $8 billion to make the future of Sydney zero carbon, and it can be done in 15 years. And the final thing is to say that we should do this stuff here in Australia, and we should do it with public investment. The very worst thing we could do right now is say, look, we'll wait around and let the rest of the world do it. Those 73,800 jobs in New South Wales in the clean energy economy, which, by the way, are 10 times the number of jobs in the coal generating and mining part of the coal generating electricity industry in New South Wales. So the coal electricity produces 7,000 jobs, clean energy 10 times that number. Those jobs will not be there if we wait around, because we will import the technology and we will import the expertise. The future for Australia is to capitalise on our public education system. Let's try and save that too, and capitalise on our TAFE system and use our skills to build a clean energy future. It's not only better for the economy and better for the environment, well, it's essential for the environment and better for the economy, it's also better for us. It's about us as Australians seizing control of our own future. It's about us saying, yes, we can do these things, yes, we should do these things, yes, we will do these things. Thank you very much.